Alright, let's begin. Alright everyone, good evening. This is CM Kosemen, and today we're gonna be talking about crabs. More specifically, we're gonna be talking about carcinization, which is the mysterious way evolution keeps producing crabs out of animals that are not real crabs. And it's a magical and wonderful thing. And we're going to be talking about this in long detail with lots of pictures and illustrations and photographs. And it's going to be a really comprehensive overview. Now, of course, if you're active on social media, you've probably seen these crab memes getting really popular these days. And they're among my favorite kinds of memes. They are really surreal. They have got this sort of irreverent and just plain outlandish kind of sense of humor. And just the animal itself, a crab is like an introvert with an enormous amount of big dick energy. So, they're cute and freaky animals, and they're really funny. And especially this meme is kind of important for our subject today. We're going to be reversing this. Instead of he has become the long boy, we're going to have multiple looks into cases where long boy crustaceans have become him, the crab, with carcinization. Well, being a crab is just marvy, you just get to sit around and exist. And as you will see, some crabs just live for free, man. They're living the dream. Well, this is about carcinization, which is, if you don't know, the animals we know as crabs are only a specific group of animals. And there are other multiple groups of animals that look almost exactly the same, but phylogenetically are not crabs. And there's just something funny about a mysterious force turning everything into crabs, like a twisted kind of Animorphs novel. And this is called carcinization. For example, none of the animals you see here are true crabs. What are they? Well, they're a bit like, oh my god, what's this noise? It's a crab party, only crab party. This is a crab party, it's a crab party, only crab party. This is crab party. Well, what is carcinization? Let's go. According to one famous naturalist, it's one of the many attempts of nature to evolve a crab. And this is just really insightful, because it's almost as if nature is this kind of crack-addicted, misunderstood genius artist wasting away in some slum of New York or something. And then years later, some doe-eyed art critic types come in and they find all these crabs having a crab party, and they're like, these are crabs. This is his whole life's work. Whole life. Nature was just trying to make crabs all along. Well, it's almost as fascinating as that, to be honest. The evolution of a crab is a bit like parallel evolution. That is to say, the tendency of different animals to evolve similar shapes under similar conditions. For example, as you can see in this picture, clockwise from top left, ichthyosaurs, dolphins, sharks, and penguins, despite coming from disparate ancestry, have evolved similar or almost same body shapes. This is called parallel evolution. The evolution of crabs, or carcinization, is a bit like that. But it's a slightly different story, because in case of crabs, the base groups are closely related to begin with. So maybe a closer analogy would be the evolution of snake-like animals among reptiles. So if you don't know, the only true snake in this picture is the one on the bottom right, and the others are, well, this thing is actually related to geckos. This thing is related to, well, a specific group of lizards. It's a legless glass lizard. And this is some other sort of burrowing legless skink. So these animals are not as distantly related as these guys are. You know, they're still reptiles. But time and again, a sort of real deal solution gets repeated by different clades that nevertheless share a similar ancestry. And I think the story of snake evolution, or the story of the evolution of snake-like forms in squamates, is a bit similar. And maybe I'll do a podcast in the future dealing with all these snake-like things. Just let me know if you want to see a video like that. So carcinization is a similar story, and now we're gonna be looking at every group of animal that looks like crabs. But before we begin, please follow the Tug Crab's advice and consider donating to me on patreon.com. My page is on patreon.com/cmkozeman, and I live in a country where a dollar can buy a lot and increasingly more of my local currency. So if you even donate a single dollar per month, it can really, like, for $1, I can eat a whole meal. I can get by for an entire day. How cool is that? You would have supported me to make videos like this. So yeah, let's go back to carcinization. Let's get crabby. Basically, crabs are part of a great radiation of crustaceans, which are arthropods, which is a whole other evolutionary tangle. But there's an enormous group of crustaceans known as decapods, the 10-legged ones. And this is a simplified diagram. So as you can see, prawns are there, you know, lobsters are there, other strange creatures are there. And only this last purple group, only this group are the true crabs. You know, they're the real deal. And in this other group, known as anomura, but not exclusively, there are some other weird exceptions. Only in this group, you got several other cases where things indistinguishable from crabs emerge. And that's our background to carcinization. So all these pink guys, some magical evolutionary effect is going on them. And they're turning into crabs. It's a wild crab party out there. And we're gonna see them all. But first, let's get a little rough handle on what true crabs are. Basically, crabs are crabs. They exist all around the world's oceans. And for millions of years, they have been radiating big dick energy into various niches they have occupied, and they're just cool. I mean, there are giant crabs like the famous Japanese giant spider crab, Macroshaira campheri. And this is what they look like under the sea. A huge, walking, gigantic spider-like shape. And there are also some really tiny crabs. For example, some parasitic crabs. That's really interesting. This is actually a whole podcast topic on its own, parasitic crabs. They live in mussels and other seashells, and they're like, you know, especially look at this guy on the right. And it's such a soft little crab that it's the size of a pea, and it's got no hard shell, and it basically looks like its entire life is a big, never-ending session of molluscan cunnilingus. I'm sorry if this was rude, but that's what it looks like. This guy is called Pinnoteres, and this guy is called Serenoteres. And there are some other kinds of parasitic crabs. Just go Google them. So these are all true crabs. This is just the diversity of this group in a very rough outline. In prehistoric times, there used to be even weirder crabs. For example, this guy called Callichimera perplexa was like a powerful predatory swimmer with big eyes and jaw-like claws and paddle-like legs. Scientists think it swam with these flattened legs and was like a voracious predator of other small marine animals. This kind of crab created a lot of hype when it was first published, and everyone was going like, it's a kind of body plan no one ever saw before. But if you go back, you'll actually see that the swimming crabs living today are not that different. They got the predatory claws, they got the swimming limbs. Their eyes are smaller, but heck, who cares? Even their bodies are hydrodynamic. These spikes help this guy swim. So this was a strange but by no means unique kind of prehistoric true crab. And crabs are so diverse. I mean, I can't even begin, you know. I could, if I had to make a podcast talking about every major group of crabs, let alone species, that podcast would take a day. And if you're interested about crabs, just go to www.crabdatabase.info. It's an amazing website, and it's got information of all major groups of crabs and then some more. It's an amazing resource, and websites like this are why the internet is such a great thing, such a repository of information. And look at all these families. I mean, they're bizarre. And, I'm just going to talk about them. There are swimming crabs, there are stone-like box crabs, there are needle crabs, and these are all true crabs. More than 10,000 species. And I'm certain there's like 20,000 more awaiting discovery in the world's oceans. But we're not going to be talking about them. Instead, we're going to be talking about carcinization, which is the separate evolution of crab-like crabby things that are not true crabs. But before we do that, let's look at the basemost crabs. When I talk about based crabs, I'm not talking about crabs with a certain political view. I'm talking about crabs at the root of the family tree of crabs. So if you imagine the tree of life is like a branch, in every animal group, not just crabs, but also with spiders and everything else, you got these bottommost base branches that are like in that group, but barely. So in the case of crabs, these groups are united under an umbrella name called podotremata. And let's just take a brief look at those. They're quite different from crabs as we know them. For example, in one group called Raninoidea, which is like the frog crabs or whatever, the body is like kind of compressed from side to side, and the legs have been adapted for digging, and the claws are really strange. They're like some kind of socket wrench or other kind of tool, and this is what they look like. One thing important to see here is this butt, which is actually another body segment. Normally when you look at crabs, you think it's just one body. But no, there's actually a kind of tail region that's curled under that big blobby segment. And when we look at these basal raninoid crabs, we see that the tail has not been curled under. It's still kind of dangling about, and you can really see it. So these guys are like still true crabs. So we can't really say they have been carcinized because they are the real deal. But still, they're really interesting to observe in terms of how evolution works with these types of body plans, Oh my God, I'm coming down with the flu. I hope it's not the COVID, and I hope you're all staying safe, because I'm recording this on the 29th of 29th of October 2020, and at the time of recording, COVID cases all around the world are spiking again. But I don't care, because I got these crabs. But you should care and stay safe. For example, another group of crabs, true crabs, but primitive crabs within this group of podotremata are called the homolodromioidea, which is like homologous legs, I guess. This is all based on like 3 days of research, so please correct me if I'm making any mistakes. But with this group, the deal is that their rear legs, look at them. They have evolved into some weird claw-like things, and they use them to carry stuff about underwater as they walk about. How bizarre. They use this for disguise, or sometimes they wield anemones or stinging coral or whatever, and they just, and I'm certain there are cases where they are doing this to impress other members of their species. But it's really interesting that this entire lineage has like what could only be called butt hands in order to carry just stuff. And think about it, like these guys are like real deal tool users. They've been using tools for millions of years, and they don't need brains to do that. How cool is that? Also, another thing with this group, and actually with this whole presentation, there are a lot of cases where animals are represented with photographs that are really like explicit and vivid and bright, such as these guys. But this kind of photography doesn't reveal the true beauty of these animals in their environment, like this. You see, there's a way to look at these animals like this, a natural insight photograph with other fish and other animals sharing this habitat. And another way to look at them is by this kind of like everything is out there to see kind of display. And both displays have their advantages. For example, this kind of view or photography is really good for comparative anatomy. But this kind, seeing an animal in its natural habitat with other animals or like situational debris around it, it really shows us what a special thing nature is, you know. Anyways, let's keep going. Another group of podotrematan crabs are these kind of hairy rock crabs that are still like a bit primitive compared to other crabs. Look at it. This is called dromia, and it's from the higher clade known as dromioidea, and it's just a shy, hairy introvert. And sometimes it looks as if it comes up to the boat to sell you some cannabis. It's legal in this waters, man. You want a toke? How many grams you want? And of course, this particular crab in this photograph is once again using a sponge as shelter. And I guess it's using its back legs to do it. So maybe there's a kind of thing with this entire family. But once again, and then there's another group of basal crabs called the cyclodogrypoidea. And these guys are like, you know, that's the cool thing about nature. So with every group of animals, there are like these, you know, star animal groups. Like you look at birds, there are parrots and stuff. You look at spiders, there's tarantulas and, you know, really brightly colored jumping spiders. Or, you know, you look at dinosaurs, you got the star groups of dinosaurs, the theropods and the sauropods and whatnot. But then every now and then, there are these strange groups that look like, you know, a barely remembered second-hand Chinese bootleg game from 1983 that you discover in a garage sale somewhere, that are just so bizarre and they're just so unknown, underrepresented, that there's a cool obscurity about them. And this is one of the really great things about nature, that no matter how many big boxes we want to classify things in, there's always some weird surprises like this. And this group, the Cyclodoripoidean primitive crabs, they still have this like vestigial tail that's not curled under. And how cool is this? 4 of their 8 legs have become tiny. I don't know what they use them for. And the other 4 have become big, and they use them to walk around on the seafloor. And that's about as much I could learn about them. It's really like, this is the crab equivalent of like this bootleg Japanese game from a company that doesn't exist anymore. But you're strangely drawn into them. Anyways, let's go. Now we're going to be talking about carcinization for real. Because now we're studying a group of animals known as the anomurans that are not true crabs. So forget everything you know. These are truly carcinized animals. Anomura is a really big group. They're kind of like half shrimp, half crab type of things. Some of them look like crawdads, and they're like a really big and diverse group. A lot of this diversity is made up of hermit crabs, actually, which are, for our purposes, we don't consider them truly crab-shaped, but as you can see here, they got these long, soft bodies that they need shells to protect in. But within this group, we got certain animals. Look at this. We're going to go in much more closer to them. They're indistinguishable from crabs. This is carcinization. And for example, here we go. One group called the Aeglidae. This kind of like half-assed freshwater crayfish kind of thing. And it's like a DIY garage kit attempt to evolve a crab under river conditions. So these guys live mostly in South America, if not exclusively, and independently from true crabs, they have become crab-like things, because that's the way to go. Once you get crab, you never go back. And then there's another group, and this is like one of the loneliest groups out there, because this entire group, it's as distinct a group as the previous guys I just showed you, but this entire group only has one species, Lomis hirta, the hairy stone crab. And you see its body looks like a crab, but take a look, this guy is cheating. 2 segments have become fused into one boxy thing, whereas in true crabs, this was just one big blocky crab butt. But this guy has done it differently, and he's like a true outsider, you know, a true introvert, because all these guys want to do is to be left alone. And unless I'm mistaken, they live around Australia, I believe. Australia is like a grab bag for all these weird groups of animals anyways. And they just hang around, and they're hairy and they're cool. They are an alternative body plan that's the same as crabs, but they're not crabs. How could this shit be? Another group called the mole crabs, or the Hippoidea, has evolved crabby forms at least 3 times. How maniacal is that? Take a look at this. Where did you see this body shape before? We saw them with the Basal podotrematan raninoidea crabs. You know, the elongated vase-like shape. But this is a completely independent reinvention of that same body plan. Take a look. But mole crabs are different. They are in the anomuran group. Anyway, you got the Blepharophidian, or how do you spell this? Blepharopodon or Blepharopodidae group, which is like unicorn mole crabs, I guess. They dig around, but you see their tail is like big and it's like an excavator. Then you got the kind of smooth mole crabs that have evolved as crab-like body shape independently within the same group called the Hippidae group. And if you live in the west coast of the United States, you'll see these guys in beaches. They're called Emerita and they got many different shapes. They're really smooth. And I don't have documentary evidence to prove this, but I'm 100% certain these guys live around California, Washington State, Oregon beaches, where all the creative film industry professionals lived or live. And I'm almost certain that this kind of transport ship you see in the Star Wars saga is influenced directly from a mole crab of the species of the genus Emerita. And I think we could use many more designs like this. I urge all of you artists and concept artists watching this to make more spaceships out of invertebrate animals. We need them. We desperately need them, especially with the crap the Star Wars saga has become. But anyways, then you got another group of anomurans that are not crabs, that have independently, like this time they really become like crabby, I'm talking about the Litodidae group of stone crabs. They're fished and eaten all over the world. In Alaska, there's this species, Paralithodes kamchatsicus. And in Japan, you got Paralithodes platypus. And everyone eats these poor guys, which is, I guess, a little sad. They can obviously feel pain when they're hung up for display in fishers markets. They're obviously suffering. But man, they taste really good. I wish there was a humane way to eat crab meat, but that's a whole discussion around meat, which we will tackle another day. But okay, ask any person on the street, what's this, Yamamoto-san? Or you say, hey, what's this, Shirley? Everyone on the street, like any normie, would say, it's a crab, a rather big crab, but it's a crab. But guess what? It's not a crab. It's not a true crab. It's a carcinized anomuran that has independently evolved a crab body shape. Sugoi! How cool is that? It's unbelievable. And in this group, this whole Litodidae group is a really big group. It's almost as diverse as true crabs themselves. You got some really weird shapes, like you got these bat turtle crabs, Cryptolithodes, and it looks like this. You would never think it's a crab-like creature, but you flip this guy, turns out it's got claws and legs. How cool is this? And to make things more complicated, there are true crabs that are known as stone crabs that kind of look like this, but this body shape has been evolved independently. Oh my god. Then there's another group of anomurans related to Litodidae called the Hapalogastridae, and they have evolved a crab-like body shape once more. Yeah, you would say this is a crab, but no, it's not a crab. It's an anomuran that has, like for the fifth or whatever umpteenth time, has become crab-like. Because being crab-like is the way to go. Then you get to this big group of anomuran crustaceans that are called the Paguridae. These are the hermit crabs. And hermit crabs are a very big and widespread group. And some of them, this is what a hermit crab looks like when it's not in its host shell. It's got a big, soft, flabby tail and these like strange extra legs. But guess what? Some hermit crabs have independently lost this soft butt nonsense and have become like crabs. Carcinization. This guy is called Lavishly-illustrated splendescens, and usually they go about without a shell. Or another group within the Paguridae called Porcellanopagurus has again independently become crab-like. Another one called Solitariopagurus truly rostris. Once again, if you see this guy, you've seen, it's a crab with a limpet on its back. I mean, what difference does this have from, if you go back, like this guy. This guy was a true crab, a basal true crab, but still, you would say, it's like this, but smaller. It's not. It's actually a reverse engineered hermit crab. Whew. I mean, if you're interested in evolution, and it's just mind-boggling how lineages go back and forth between certain adaptations and come up with the same body plan. It's just like, if you get your kicks off this way, crabs give you a hell of a kick. Another one called Patagurus rex. This guy has dispensed with host shells entirely. The entire butt is like this kind of squiggly kind of thing. But you can almost always tell hermit crab lineage crab things by their long and whip-like antennae. But to make things more complicated, I'm sure there are true crabs with long and whip-like antennae too, so let's not go there. But this is another case of carcinization within the pagurid anomurans. So hermit crabs have at least 3 or 4 times independently become carcinized. Then we got to this other group, and this is really special and close to my heart because these giant coconut crabs on the Pacific? Everyone thinks they're true crabs, but no. The biggest, in brackets, crab in the world is not a true crab. In fact, it's a kind of coenobitid anomuran crab that's almost distantly related to hermit crabs. But it's a giant Burgess latro. Look at it. I mean, it's just solidly built, solid, rock-steady, dependable boy. But you could tell its relation to hermit crabs when you study these whip-like antennae that come up from a part of the body that's after the eyes. That's really unique. If you go back to the anomuran, the hermit crab lineage, you got the same feature. So this is the telltale sign of coenobitid. Some people classify these within the hermit crabs, but some people don't, and I assume the latter approach. But it's a giant crab-like thing that's not a true crab. And of course, recently, these guys made the news again by invading a picnic in Christmas Island. And they seem to be having a party. Oh my god, what does this sound like? Drop it. This is a crab party. It's a crab party. It's a crab party. Only crab party. This is a crab party. Only crab party. Only crab party. But a not true crab party because it's an anomuran kind of coenobitid hermit crab giant party. Well, that doesn't make for great lyrics, does it? But that's just the world we live in. Can't trust a crab these days. Could be anything. And again, another group, Porcellanidae, the porcelain crabs, is a huge, big, diverse group of crab-like non-crabs. I've lost count of how many cases of carcinization we have been observing. But this group is almost as diverse as crabs themselves, and they got smooth and drab ones called petrolistes, and you got like bright and fancy ones called neopetrolistes, and it's just a huge and wonderful radiation of crab-like animals. Another trick you could use to tell true crabs from non-crabs is to count their legs. True crabs usually have 8 legs, but these independently carcinized crab-like things almost always have 6 legs. But to make things more complicated, there is also a group of true crabs also with 6 legs. So also there are these other, like, if you remember, back, these like weird things with 4 legs. So, you know, you can't really depend on a leg count because it's the crab party. Anybody's legs could be anybody's. But it's like 80% of the time a good way to figure things out. Another group of carcinized animals within the anomurans are these guys, Munidopsidae. These are like flattened shrimp-like animals, but some of them have become crab-like once again. They're like kind of these half crab-like things. This is another really nice thing about nature. Like, some of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the practice of speculative evolution, this art form where artists get to design their own alien environments and worlds and lineages. So, one of the great things about nature is that for every like notable kind of animal, there are at least 10 kinds of like drab vanilla animals that are just there, you know, being diverse. And I think this is the case with these munidopsid anomurans. They're just there. And if one studied them, you would see they're unique. But if you see them in the ocean, you would just say, bland crab. But they're not crabs. Another animal within this group is probably one of the coolest crab-like animals in the ocean. Behold, Shinkaya crosnieri. This is a geothermal vent crab-like thing. So these guys live deep below the ocean near geothermal vents where methane and sulfur escape fissures on the Earth's floor. And these guys are so lucky. They have a free life. In their arms, there are these hairs. And the hairs are coated with bacteria that turn this methane gas into food. And all these animals do is to wave their hands in the water and lick them every now and then. And that way, they could feed off directly, almost directly, from the methane emissions themselves. Look at it. A bunch of pale crab-like things huddled together, waving their arms around the sea like no one cares. Sounds almost like this is a crab party, geothermal crab party. It's a crab party. It's a crab party. Oh my God. If you only knew, this is actually a fake crab party. It's being held by Munidopsid anomurans. But who cares when you're having fun and snorting methane off a hooker's butt? I don't know. Anyways, this was the extent of carcinization in anomurans. It was a wild ride, but it's not over yet. There are other groups of invertebrates that have done the crab trick independently. Let's take a look at them. For example, there's this bizarre group of sea spiders known as Pycnogonida. They are these like pipe cleaner type of things. If you squint, you would say these are like a primitive case of carcinization. Their whole body has been compressed into one ball. But interestingly, with these guys, there's no middle shell. Instead, the organs, like hearts and parts of the brain even, extend into the legs. And another cool thing about these animals is that no one knows how to classify them properly. I mean, they're probably the most primitive relatives of all or nearly all water-living arthropods, but no one knows for sure. They're really strange alien animals. Then there are these guys, the Xiphosurans, the king crabs that everyone knows. Not king crabs, horseshoe crabs. Limulus. They are some of the most ancient animals living around. I think they figured out a crabby body plan long before true crabs did. And in arachnids, there are cases too. I mean, you could argue that harvestmen, also known as opilions, represent a case of carcinization on land. And this group of spider relatives are really unique and they're really diverse. One day I will also do a big podcast of all arachnid groups. Keep your fingers crossed for that one. Oh my god. Oh, my throat is really sore from all these crabs I've been talking about. So forgive me if I start sounding like Leonard Cohen towards the end. And within the arachnids, there's this enormously diverse group called the Acari, mites, ticks, and relatives. And you could argue that morphologically speaking, they have done the crab trick on land. And of course, this is just a huge and very extensive group of animals. There are probably more species of mites than insects almost, but that's a whole other story for another time. Then within insects, you got what are these guys called? Phtyrus parasites. Lice. I mean, look at the body. It's an insect that has evolved a crab-like body in a very different environment offered by their host's hair, fur, and skin. It's amazing, like these guys are having carcinization on land. And there are also extinct cases where crab-like things have evolved before true crabs have. For example, there's an enormous radiation of animals known as the cichlidans. They are known from shells and they're kind of like coin crab kind of things. And they evolved before true crabs. So actually everything else, including crabs, are imitating these guys, one could argue. They're also notable for surviving the biggest extinction in the world's history, the Ant-Permian extinction. They've come up pretty much unscathed. And, they've gone on and become extinct shortly after the evolution of dinosaurs. And we know them from extensive fossils. We think they're relatives of these other obscure group of arthropods known as branchiurids, but, no one's really sure. These are fossils, you can't really DNA test them. But anyways, then you got this group of animals called Eurypterids. For example, they're famous as the giant sea scorpions you see in these nature documentaries. And some Eurypterids were going for a kind of crabby thing. For example, this species, Brachyopterus, was evolving a big head and like kind of shorter tail segments and longer legs. This is an artwork by this amazing artist named Alphinix. Please visit them and support their artwork on patreon.com/Alphinix. And this is their rendition of Brachyopterus, a sea scorpion that was kind of trying to become like a crab. And there's this other species known as Hibertopterus with a really like big helmet-like front portion. It's almost like a sea scorpion trying to imitate a horseshoe crab. But look at its size. It's gigantic. It was as big as a person, if not bigger. A cat could probably fit in it. But this is just how an amazing body plan the crab body plan is. Everybody's been trying to do it for millions of years. It has happened before and it will happen again. Now let's look at our own group, shall we? Could there be other squat, rotund, and generally squishy animals among backboned animals that we could almost say are examples of vertebrate carcinization? Frogs come to mind. They're kind of squat, they got big mouths, and the positioning of their eyes and their all overall body shape seems like it's not too different from a crab. But actually it must be the turtles that are the backboned animals examples of it. They are the backboned animals attempt to evolve a crab as much as they can. Instead of a crab's claw, they got this hooked jaw, and they got this armored body, and it's just the entire difference of the vertebrate body plan that makes them, this is as close to crabs as a vertebrate animal can come. I am you, but stronger, says the crab to the turtle before taking him away to bed. Anyways, but that's not all. There are also cases of speculative carcinization in the broad literature of science fiction. For example, if you watch the King Kong movies of the 2000s, especially with Peter Jackson's King Kong, there's an entire ecosystem called Skull Island. And in the film and in the books that accompany that film, you got all these strange, gigantic monster crabs. This one is called Deplector. It's as big as a car and it can grab people. And I guess it's the relative of a hermit crab. It uses its hindquarters to anchor into a cave, and from there it can lash out to grab people. There's this other kind of giant spidery crab called Abyscidus. And then in the extended universe Skull Island books, there are these crabs called Funucaris and Impurucaris. This is a general evil crab, and this is a swimming evil crab. They're just evil because everything in Skull Island is just monstrous. And then there's even a case in science fiction literature, like how lucky are we to be living in this age? There's even a case where a person has gone out of their way to write about humans evolving a kind of carcinization in space with Douglas Dixon's vacuumorph. So Douglas Dixon is like the grandfather of speculative evolution. He's written books about what would happen if humans went extinct and animals would evolve in the future. He's also written a book about future evolution of humanity. And in that book, there's a kind of genetically altered human species. As you can see, its backbone has been twisted almost like that of a crab. And it's covered with some sort of space-proof skin. And in the book, these vacuumorph people live in zero-gravity space environments, and they can even perform spacewalks without needing a spacesuit. Though, I don't know if a civilization is advanced enough to genetically modify people into space turtle crabs, why would they need to have space stations? Can't you have a robot that goes up there and all the people can live on the planet and enjoy the resources from space without having to undergo these horrible mutations? But that's the beauty of science fiction for you. And there's even a case of carcinized god people ruling all of space-time in the novel called The Time Ships by Stephen Baxter. This book is an unofficial sequel to H.G. Wells' Time Machine. And long story short, in this book, there's a race of far future human crabs that have become carcinized. You could see their body plan. They got a mouth, they got claw-like hands, and a big blobby brain body. And these guys watch travelers in time machines as they go towards the future. And it's implied that these time watchers are so advanced that they can help humans spread and colonize other dimensions of time. And ultimately, they help humanity colonize every possible reality through the use of time machines. This is the kind of hyper-mechanistic extrapolation that Stephen Baxter really likes to write about. But it's also really cool that the most godlike race of human descendants portrayed in science fiction comes in the shape of a crab. This is a crab party, future crab party. We're all crabs in here. You're all crabs in here. Anyways, thanks for watching. I have the flu and I think I really destroyed my voice box with this podcast. So I hope you enjoyed it and I hope I was intelligible. I hope my voice was clear. And I hope I didn't make any enormous mistakes. I hope I didn't make any enormous mistakes in terms of classification, biology, cladistics. If you have any suggestions or critiques, please share them with me. And, thanks for watching. And since I'm going to be needing enormous amounts of cold medicine, please consider supporting me on patreon.com, where I live, a magical land where $1 buys almost 10 of my currency now. I could afford an entire box of Nurofen with just $1. You could cure me. You could listen to my voice. I'm dying in here. I'm dying in here talking about crabs and carcinization and far future human crab gods to you, my dear followers, just because I love it. But you know what? I'd love it more if you could be as cool as these guys and donate me a little, just a little, man, on patreon.com. And I'd like to thank all of my patrons: Andrew, Lauren, Dale, Lane, Burak, Gregory, and Slime, Anna, Jakub, Ryan, MacLeod, Savan, Eugene, Nathan, Tall Green Boy, Thomas, Joshua, Hammock God, Biblaridian, Jerome, Lars, Ezekiel, 44, Kevin, Mike. Thank you all. You afforded part of my cold medicine. And you afforded part of my dinner, my food, gas I buy for my car. You made this crabby disaster of a podcast possible. And thank you all. Without you, this endeavor, I would still make it, no lie, because I do this out of my heart. But without you, it would be harder and less rewarding. So, keep crabby and have a nice day, everyone, while I go and gargle my throat with some iodine or something.